I was joking with someone on my team before I came today because I'm the hardware guy at the software conference, and it's sort of like being the lamb amongst the wolves, and then I realized that I'm the guy that's standing between the wolves and lunch, so it's even worse. But hopefully what you'll see here is that the world between devices, and Joe gave me a great introduction with his presentation about the future of connected things. Hopefully you'll see that the way we're thinking about connected things is so similar to what we've been talking about APIs that it really is one world. Just to give you a sense of my background, I'm an entrepreneur who's now living within Intel. I recently, I guess, 4 years ago, started a company called Basis, and you're all receiving little presents from me today with that logo on it. Started a company that's all about measuring data, empowering people with data in a world that people aren't used to being empowered, and that's in sort of wellness and fitness. That's a world where data comes from a guy in a lab coat who's scary and takes your money, and that's if you're lucky. So we're trying to really democratize that and really empower people with data that they can use every day. And in doing that from a startup context, really learned through hard knocks how important data is in terms of all the metrics we've been thinking about engagement and how to interact with users and data. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of how data plays into the life of a device creator. And then maybe some of the things that we're doing right up until this minute and maybe a little bit in the future around devices that are going to become realities in terms of big data very soon. So hopefully statistics like this are becoming familiar to people. We see a huge opportunity in terms of connected devices. The number of devices forecast to be in our lives is incredible. Even if you believe conservative forecasts, the devices that are going to be in and around our body, that are going to be in our lives and our desks, are going to increase by orders of magnitude over the next years. And it was interesting looking at Joe's presentation and looking out at 2025. My mind kind of explodes when I think that far out. And I'm looking at forecasts for the next 3 years and kind of scared about how much is coming along, but also kind of excited about that. So along those lines, I think a lot about wearables because I built a company that sort of creates them. It's sort of one lens on the new device ecosystem. We think a lot about tablets and smartphones. Wearables is another kind of emerging trend in that area. And depending on which forecast you believe, things are kind of exciting or ridiculously amazing. Either way you look at it, we're already seeing this curve realize. So I think we all need to be prepared for what this means for our lives, even just maybe a year from now. I'll give you some examples. So this is a product that my company announced recently. It's coming out in the not too distant future, and hopefully presents that you guys receive today will inspire you to sort of take more interest in your health and in your wellness and follow us as we create better and better products in this area. Wearables don't need to be ugly, clunky things. They could be beautiful things that actually look like things we already know how to use. One of the things that I often got asked in the early days of our business was, why did you build a watch? And I joke because when we first went to investors, people looked at it and said, well, nobody wears watches anymore, and this looks like something from the 80s, and what do you think you're doing? And the other end of the spectrum now, wearables are going to be all these hundreds of millions of devices. And I think somewhere in the middle, we were the perfect company, And that's really looking into the future of what technology could enable was a big part of that. Taking a form factor that people were familiar with. We never had to explain to people how to wear this thing, but it provided so much value on top of what they ordinarily associate with that form factor. That's been a big part of it for us. Just looking at sort of what a device like this can contribute to your life, I want you to think about all these data sources being collected every moment of your day, 24/7, and what that means in terms of the data upstream that we can provide. So at a sensor level, we're measuring heart rate. I can check my heart rate on stage. It's not good. I can see how much activity I've had today. I'm measuring my skin temperature. I'm measuring my perspiration levels. Probably not good either. But I'm also measuring context based on that. I think one of the things Joe said is, it's all well and good to measure the atoms, but what about the meaning? And the thing that we did, which was material for us, was kind of on 2 layers. The first one was automatically detecting what you're doing. So this device, the one that you're receiving today, detects automatically whether you're walking, running, or cycling. It measures when you fall asleep and wake up. It measures sleep cycles about the same accuracy as a sleep study. And it does that just by wearing the device on your wrist. You don't have to tell it you're doing any of those things. So all of that meaning sort of comes preloaded for free. But even that wasn't enough. So we looked at behavioral science. How do we actually use that information to change people's lives? We studied things like gamification and all the sort of buzzwords around making meaning out of data. And what we realized is, changing people's behavior is extremely tough in regular contexts. And when you think about health and fitness, it's something that changes so slowly that that instant gratification that can be used to motivate change just isn't there. Health changes on the order of months and years. People want instant gratification today. So we set up a system called Healthy Habits, which you'll all get to try. And what that really is using this data to set daily goals. And those goals are super simple to start with, very, very simple. But they scale up pretty quickly if you do them well. And there's a system in there that ratchets up the change so that you're getting rewarded for little changes, so that when you look back, you realize you've actually come a long way and been rewarded at every step. So we're thinking a lot about how to use all this information to actually change people's behavior as well. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about sort of what's happening next in the context of Intel and the group that I belong inside there called the New Devices Group. This is a sort of proof of concept demonstration that we showed at CES, headphones. And you look at them and you think, well, this is great. I've been using these for 20 years. The thing that's really amazing about these headphones is that they measure your heart rate, but they do it without a battery. So you never have to recharge it. You never have to replace the battery. You just plug it into your phone and it works. And you can go for a run with Runkeeper, or you can actually use these things without ever having to go back to the port. So the reason I mention these is kind of two things. The first one is things that we think have sort of accomplished all they can accomplish can be modified in ways that provide a really amazing user experience. And if you think about the context of these in a workout, that sort of makes sense. You might be used to wearing a chest strap when you go for a workout. Well, now you don't have to do that. That's cool. But what about if you're on the subway listening to your music and you're measuring heart rate in that context? How might you use that? And instead of just receiving the data about your physiology when you're in a workout, now you're receiving it all the times when these things are in your ear. And all that data is being collected and can be used for other benefits. And these things are coming to market. So this is an example of a partnership that we did with a company called SMS Audio. These products will be on the shelves this year, branded by that company. And all this data will be fed through an SDK that will be available for apps to build on. So we're not just talking about the possibility of these things, they're actually happening this year. This is another example, and this one I wanted to highlight because it's a little bit of a different mechanic in terms of device. This is the Mika bracelet that we announced in partnership with Opening Ceremony. And this device is beautiful. It was launched here at New York Fashion Week. It's a device that is so beautiful that people want to wear it even if it doesn't have any power. And it was kind of a great experience because it was sort of nerds like me working with fashion houses to source like gems and rare materials to sort of go and make this, and you bring these two worlds into one room and it's easy to sort of have a clash at that point. But if you can figure out that there's value in actually making these things aesthetically amazing, you turn up with something like this that really changes the game in terms of wearables. One thing that's also really interesting about this device is it's untethered, so it can connect directly to the cell tower. So even if you don't have your cell phone nearby, you're still getting notifications from the web. You're still getting the ability to interact with online services directly at your wrist. And that's something that we haven't seen in a lot of devices yet today, but this one will provide that. I'll touch on this again a little bit later, but one of the things we're thinking about a lot in terms of wearables is this is really an overt expression of yourself, and this is something that indicates something. I'm looking around the room, and we have a lot of sort of similar dress in terms of blazers and collared shirts. We also have a lot of flair out there as well. A lot of little pieces that indicate personality. Different colors, different patterns. And those are things that we choose for ourselves to communicate something to the outside world. And more so than in any other device, wearables have that challenge and that benefit. They need to be something that we want to wear. They need to be something that we want to associate ourselves with in terms of broadcasting. So I'll touch on that again a little later. We just announced a partnership a couple of weeks ago with a company called Fossil. And I don't know whether anyone out there studies the watch industry as much as I do, but Fossil's a pretty amazing company. People usually think about Fossil as being a company that sells a watch with the word fossil written on it. Actually, the company is a little bigger than that. The company owns some other brands that you might have heard of, brands like Armani and DKNY and Michael Kors. In fact, this brand ships tens of millions just of watches each year. So if you think about wearables, anyone in the room wearing a wearable? Anyone in the room wearing anything in terms of watches and jewelry that they wouldn't have called a wearable? Right, so just think about the scale of that business. The second group was bigger than the first for everyone facing this way. Just in terms of the number of items, these guys make more than 10,000 SKUs a year. Right, so just thinking about the scale of opportunity, we're looking at those curves that I showed you at the start, and we've been thinking about the companies in the space right now, Fitbit and Jawbone and my company Basis. Well, now there's companies that operate on a different order of magnitude entering this space. So I challenge you guys who are going to make use of this scale of data to think about wearables and new device form factors at that scale. How much data they're collecting, if they're collecting the kinds of things I'm talking about every moment of the day. Things like heart rate when you're on the subway. I wanted to touch a little bit on something else we announced just a few weeks ago called Edison. And actually, I brought mine so I could give you a sense of real scale. I'm happy to show anyone out there at lunch who wants to see it. It's really hard. Good thing is it's really hard to see from even this far away. It's a tiny little device like this, and this is a dual-core computer with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And so I just wanted to give you a sense of the amount of compute power that you can build into objects now. So there's very little in our lives that this wouldn't fit on or in. There's sort of 3 data points here that I think are really game changers around Edison. One is we have a lot of hackers in our organizations. I think sometimes we don't like to think about them because they're sort of on the skirts of our society. But Intel has a great hacking community, and a lot of our organizations do. And wouldn't it be amazing if those people could be enabled with an easy way to prototype smart devices? And that needs to happen at a scale that's small enough that you can actually put intelligence inside or on something, which this absolutely is. And it also needs to have an ecosystem so that if you develop something that's really cool that can be material for the business, you can actually take that to product. And of course, behind this, Intel has a pipeline that makes these solutions product optimized. So if you develop something with Edison, you can make a real product very quickly. So one of the things we're thinking about is not only enabling large companies like Fossil that are shipping millions of units every year, but how do we enable companies that don't traditionally have engineering resources internally to become intelligent device companies? Along those lines, there's a lot of industries that are thinking about this. And a lot of these industries are led by organizations that don't have the traditional expertise internally to develop smart things. But with things like Edison, we're actually enabling that. If we think about just one of these industries, apparel, for example, we did a demonstration recently where we put Edison inside a shirt, and it was measuring medical-grade ECG, in other words, heartbeat patterns, in real time, transmitting to a cell phone and straight up to the cloud for analysis. And that was developed all on that little postage stamp size chip, and developed in very short order in terms of time. So one of the things that I would hope to challenge you about is think about the hackers in your organization that are focusing on problems in their spare time or opportunities in their spare time and how they might be purposed and pointed at things that are material to your business through smart devices that ultimately are collecting data at a scale that we haven't seen before. And this is where things get crunchy on the back end. So one of the things we're thinking about now is if you have people, I think we had about 15% of the audience, if I had to guess, that were wearing smart devices, wearables, and maybe 20, 25% that were wearing things that were more fashion devices, not enabled with intelligence. If we're at a point where even just the people who raised their hands in those 2 categories are now collecting 5 or 10 data streams in real time, 24/7, what does that look like downstream in terms of data? And it looks like terabytes just from the people in this room over the course of a week. So very excited about that. I wanted to touch a little bit on a phenomenon that has crept up on us and might be entering a world near you very soon, which we call BYOD, which is this idea that people brought smartphones to their office, becoming BYOW, being your own wearable. So this is a trial that Virgin ran with Google Glass. I use this as a first example because the people who are providing a service from your organization could be wearing these things. The amount of data that they're collecting could be real-time video streams for their entire workday, or maybe beyond their workday. In this case, the ability to recognize faces of customers, the ability to give a personalized greeting for people you've never met. Think about how these wearables that people are bringing in the workplace could be really amazing in terms of providing value at the customer interface. This could be something where you're meeting with a developer and giving them personalized feedback because you can pull up their entire development history just by facial recognition, associating them with their organization, knowing what they're working on. You may never have met them before. The second way in which I wanted to sort of put this in your mind is about how you bring wearables and smart devices to your workplace and the potential benefits and risks of that. I think a lot of us work in companies where we have little swipey badges where you walk in the door and you tell the boss that you've arrived. Those kinds of things are the easy things we imagine being embedded inside wearables, identity type things. Just think also about these devices that often contain microphones, video recording devices. These are devices that are almost surreptitiously entering our meetings, entering our conversations and recording. And we think a lot about Google Glass and how overt they are and how glass holes are recording us now walking down the street. But if you see someone wearing a watch, and I'm wearing one of these things that has a lot of sensors and electronics inside it, what might they be recording? What might they be actually saving for later in a form factor that you may not even realize is doing that? So from a security perspective, we're thinking a lot about how do we enable interactions that are controlled? What's the right way to respect that data? What are the things that people might be using these things for in a constructive way? And then how might they be used in subversive ways? I wanted to touch on sort of one particular focus that we have along those lines, and that's identity. We all go to the same retailers, whether they're online or big box, and we buy the same box. But pretty much as soon as we open that box from that point forward, especially in the context of wearables where they're overt displays of our aesthetic and our association with a brand, we demand an individual experience. It has to match my color palette. It has to be my size. It has to be something that adapts to my different lives. It has to match my job, but it also has to match my group of friends. So identity is really powerful because we can use that to customize the out-of-the-box experience. The flip side of that, of course, we've started to see in terms of privacy. There's a very fine line, and it's different for different people. The ways in which we want our data to be used to identify and individualize for us. And this becomes even more overt when you talk about aesthetic, because we really are incredibly individual in terms of our presentation of these devices. So if I know who you are, what data are you okay with me using to change that presentation? How can I communicate that to others? One example I give you is we're starting to see wearable devices that broadcast an ID just of who you are. And it might be just a number. And you can control exactly what level of information you get fed back. So for example, if you walk past a TV screen in an office, it could say, hey, Marco, keep going down this hall to find your meeting. Now, you don't know which meeting I'm going to or who I'm meeting with, but that's an incredible amount of value for me. And it's from my identity that is sourced. One of the reasons we're seeing increased engagement on the wearables right now is because they're providing more value in different parts of your life. It used to be that the early successes in health trackers, for example, in my world was really around step counting. It was around pedometers that told you, did you make your 10,000 step goals today? We realized that the engagement on those was pretty poor, which is why we built a full 24/7 experience. And now you wake up in the morning, and instead of feeling like you just lost 8 hours of your life, you look at your dashboard and you see all these amazing things that your body has done, how much REM sleep you got, how much deep sleep you got. And not just that, we tell you why that's important. REM sleep's really important for mental recovery. Deep sleep's really important for physical recovery. So if you're an athlete, you can use deep sleep to tune your performance. If you're coming into an important meeting, you can tune your REM sleep to really optimize for that. So all those things are creating engagements throughout your day where identity is a key component. So I think one of the challenges we have on a mass scale right now is finding the right customization line between overt expressions of identity that are beneficial and then privacy concerns on the flip side. So I just wanted to leave you with sort of 4 quick takeaways in the couple of minutes I have between you and lunch. We see a huge opportunity here in terms of how wearables are entering our lives. The scale of hundreds of millions of devices per year entering consumer lives in terms of addition to their smartphones and their tablets, their other devices. Think about how new companies and even people within your own organizations are being enabled to create these types of devices through technologies like Edison. A lot of companies that faced the engineering cost, much as we did, of developing hardware through manufacturing and all the intense capital requirements of that are now being enabled in days and weeks through devices that are specifically designed for creating new smart devices. And they have a pipeline behind that to create products very quickly. Think about fashion. You're going to have people walking into your workplaces or contributing data into your databases that are from devices that look very different. For some people, it'll be a beautiful bracelet with gems. And for some people, it'll be a geeky watch that measures all these sorts of parameters about their health and their lifestyle. And then think about what this means in terms of BYOW. How are people walking into workplaces with their wearables? Where is that data going? What benefit could that bring, and what security risks do we face? Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. I got a question for you before we go to lunch. All right, you were part of a startup. How did you think about APIs as you were part of a startup, or did you? And how might that have changed now that you're part of Intel?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we thought about it early and often is the honest answer. In terms of the health and fitness tracking, we knew we needed to get a first-player experience perfect first. So health is one of those things where some people really want to share their health information, but everybody treats it as a single-player experience first. So health in terms of sharing is always sort of an additional layer. So really, in the early days of a startup, you have to be so focused on what you're building right. We had to get that single-player experience right, then focus on sharing after that.
And so now you're kind of thinking about how that might transition based on all the different companies that you're thinking of partnering
Exactly.
with.
And now we're thinking about not just, obviously, the device that we built, but some of these other devices that Intel's working on that we've already announced, and others that we have in the pipeline, and at a scale that is much larger than any one company that's currently playing in wearables is thinking about.
Yeah, that scale is actually a really interesting thing, going from a startup to going to a large company and the type of scale that you can have as part of that. And your bring your own wearables concept, I actually think is starting to resonate with enterprises. 9 months ago, we had only 3% of the companies that we interviewed interested in wearables. It was up to 34% in our last survey. And they're talking about glasses for hands-free. They're talking about wrist computers tied with your smartphone to give you alerts and information. So I think we're going to see a lot, both in consumer fitness and also in the enterprise. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing smartwatches displaying notifications of calls and emails from corporate accounts. So I don't think we're doing a lot of thinking yet about how those notifications on the wrist might be impacting privacy issues. If you're on the airplane and you have an aisle seat and you get a notification on your wrist, can the person next door see that if it's from your corporate email? So this is really right at the cutting edge of what we're thinking about in terms of how wearables fit our whole lives.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a lot of innovation with an open API structure around that. So looking forward to hearing more later. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you.